Hello! I don't know if I'm actually live. I don't know if we succeeded in doing this, but maybe we did. Regardless, if so we'll see if this works. Hopefully it does. Thank you. I think there are only a couple of people here, but thank you. There are now 16 people here, so now I'm feeling a lot of pressure. Um, yeah, it says that I'm live at stage 10. I do not see my. Oh, I'm live! I did it! And by I did it, I mean Nikki and Victoria and Brandon did it. And I had nothing to do with it getting done. But thank you. I think that I think
It's just like a 40-second delay, 30 or something.
there's just a nice 40-second delay, Nikki reports, which is perfect. Hey, is there any Diet Dr. Pepper?
Yes.
Um, I want to take this opportunity to talk, first off, to say a huge thank you. Thank you so much for your incredible generosity in supporting this project. Thank you so much. This is a marathon and not a sprint, and it's going to be a very long project, obviously. We're making a 5-year commitment, but we hope that we'll be able to follow this story for much longer than that. And so it's going to be a really long road, but having really overwhelming support from day one means so much to us, and I know it means so much to the people at PIH. And as we get better at figuring out this live streaming stuff, we are going to be able to hear from John Lasher, the executive director of PIH Sierra Leone, from healthcare workers in Kono who are doing this work on a daily basis and who will benefit so directly from this strengthening of the healthcare system, and hopefully even some patients. So the language in Sierra Leone is called Creole, and it has a lot of English words in it, but it also has a lot of non-English words. So we may need interpreters to some extent for some of the things that we want to do. But again, this is just getting started. We've got a long way to go. But I wanted to have this opportunity to talk with you. So over where it says chat, over there on the right side, you can ask questions or make comments as I talk, and I will try to answer all of your questions. But yeah, so this is hopefully the beginning of a regular series of conversations with our matching and leading donors to give you updates on where we are, both in terms of fundraising and where we are in terms of the expansion of healthcare services to people living in Kono. But I know that some of you are new to this and don't have any background. Some of you I know have participated in the live chats we did a few times leading up to the announcement. But I want to give you an update on where we are with the announcement, and also both in terms of fundraising and in terms of the expansion of care. So, and then also answer any questions that you have, which again, you can ask over in comments. I hope that you can hear me. Nobody's commented in a while, so now I'm getting nervous. Okay. So yeah, feel free to ask questions at any time and feel free to make comments at any time, and I will try to address them. So the weeks leading up to this have been very exciting and nerve-wracking and overwhelming for a variety of reasons, but mostly because we care so much about this and we wanted to launch it well. And we were really nervous because we have never done anything like this before. One of the challenges of this is that it isn't narrative, like it isn't straightforward and simple. You can't have, it can't be summarized in a hashtag. When you talk about strengthening systems, you're talking about doing all kinds of different work together, rather than making one intervention or another, which we really believe and we think the data is on our side, is the strongest way to make lasting effective change in impoverished communities, but it's also like probably not the easiest way to fundraise. And so we were very nervous about that. Like, we're launching a project that has no name, and we're launching a project that doesn't have, like a simple one sentence summary, because this is about trying to, reduce, when you're talking about trying to reduce child and maternal mortality, you have to talk about systems-wide problems. So I'll give you and this is confidential, please, if that's okay, just because it helps me. There are a couple reasons for the confidentiality. One reason is that for this to work, we have the support of the Sierra Leonean government. In fact, the president of Sierra Leone tweeted about this project, which is really cool and exciting. And in that tweet, he used very encouraging language. Unconditional support, I believe, was one of the phrases. So that's good news. But we also need to make sure that every step of the way we're with PIH and with the Ministry of Health on this project. And so some of the stuff I'll talk about is stuff that's confidential for now, because we want to make sure that everybody's completely on the same page, and all the stakeholders have been that we are marching together. But the overall concept is that we need to raise $25 million total to support this project for 5 years. But a lot of that money has to already be raised or pledged in order to start the Maternal Center of Excellence and the renovation of Koidu Government Hospital. So the things that can happen immediately are more community health workers, which there's an urgent need for. There are a lot of people in Kono who have HIV or tuberculosis, or who probably have high-risk pregnancies, but those high-risk pregnancies aren't being identified because those people aren't being seen by a community health worker. And that, I think, from what I understand at least, that program can expand quickly, and that is scalable. And then the next level up, you have the primary healthcare centers. There's one really good primary healthcare center in Kono, and I'm going to make a video about this after Pizzamas is over and the Let It Snow movie's out, and I've gotten a good night's sleep. Because there is one really good clinic in Kono. It's called the Well Body Clinic, and it's actually it's not just really good, for an impoverished community. It's really good. Like I would be happy with my kids getting care at Well Body, or with me getting care at Well Body. It's over. There are too many people who go there. It sees like 300 patients a day, and I think, in a perfect world at their current staffing levels, they might see, somewhat fewer patients. But the reason it sees 300 patients a day is because people in the community trust it, and they trust it for good reason. There hasn't been a maternal death there in more than 3 years, which is in stark contrast to every other primary care center in the region. And, they have electricity, they have running water, they have a really great laboratory, so they can, do things like type malaria and diagnose all kinds of infectious diseases. And that's, super important, because infectious diseases are still one of the leading causes of death in Kono. So there's that clinic, which is being supported by PIH now, and I think very effectively. Getting the other 5 clinics in the region to that level is going to be a big challenge, because there's Partners in Health always talks about the 4 S's: staff, stuff, systems, and space. And all 4 of those S's need to be amped up at those other primary healthcare centers. So we visited one. There's no electricity, there's no water, there's very little record keeping, because it's hard to keep records about anything other than vaccination. And there's also almost no patients, because there's no reason you wouldn't want to go there. Frankly, you wouldn't want to go there if you were sick. I wouldn't want to go there if I was sick. You're not going to get good care because there isn't, you know, there are no medications. What medications there are, there's no climate control for, and they're usually out of date. So they're not, their efficacy is unknown in some cases. But even then, I mean, there were no antibiotics for adults of any kind. There were some, there's some like penicillin for kids, but no antibiotics for adults of any kind. There was, no. It was shocking. Yeah, so that is the next level, and then the third level is the government hospital. So one of the things PIH feels very strongly about, and I think that this is right, if you travel at all in poor countries, you see over and over and over again abandoned buildings, or you see, I mean, the classic example of this is at this primary healthcare center that we visited, which had no supplies, no running water, it had nothing except for vaccines, which thank God it has vaccines and kids are getting vaccinated and that's great. But like, obviously that's not all that a clinic should be doing. They did have this really nice centrifuge that had been donated, but they don't have any electricity. So like, doesn't matter. And PIH doesn't want to further that problem by building buildings that eventually get abandoned or by donating this equipment or that equipment that can't be run because the systems don't support it. And so that's why they're not going to make the big, they're not going to make the big strengthenings over the next 5 years until they know that they have all this money. And so for us, we are conscious of the fact that this is a crisis. And so we are in a hurry, and I do feel like I'm in a hurry. And I think PIH shares that feeling very, very much. I mean, they're on the ground, they are paying many of the staffers at Koidu Government Hospital, and so they're in the kids unit and the maternal care unit every day, and they know that those units are profoundly insufficient. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to start something they can't finish. They don't want to, they don't want to be another group that makes a commitment that it doesn't keep to in Kono, because the people of Kono have suffered from that long enough. So that's why we are. The challenge of this from a fundraising perspective is that we can make long-term pledges, and that helps. So even though we're only giving $1.3 million a year, but we're pledging to give it for 5 years, they can count that whole $6.5 million against this $25 million they need to raise to make this long-term commitment to rebuilding KGH and building it with a maternal center of excellence and everything. But that also means that we've got to, between monthly donors, the incredibly generous people like you who have become matching donors, and then the few people who were asking to be, the big donors, the few people who are in a position to give similar amounts to what Hank and I are. Between all of that, we need to get to 25. That's the long and short of it. I should have said that in 3 sentences, but I said it in 400. All right, so here's where we are. Again, this is confidential. The other thing is that we're in the process of signing, this is very in the weeds, but I'm just gonna, I feel like it'll be helpful background. We're in the process of signing this thing called a commercial co-venture. So for reasons that are a little opaque to me, we're not allowed, DFTBA.com has to sign a commercial co-venture agreement with Partners in Health in order to say that we give all of our profits to Partners in Health. So if you've heard us like stop saying that, it's because it turns out that we weren't allowed to say that. We were just confused. Even though we are giving, well, nope, not going to say that until the commercial co-venture agreement is signed. Right. So we can say that we're giving all of our profits to charity, but we can't be specific until we've signed this commercial co-venture agreement. So all of this is contingent upon that commercial co-venture agreement working out, which I don't see any issues with, except that it's like a little bit of a paperwork pain, but I don't see any like problems with it, and I think we're close to getting it all settled. So with that in mind, basically, and again, please don't share this outside of this community, the community within the community. We have 6.5 from Hank and me. We think DFTBA, Lights Library, and touring can, over the course of 5 years, raise about another 3, which would take us to like around 10. And then we think we have 5 million raised from one extremely generous, super rich person. I don't know how else to describe them. I don't think that would hurt their feelings. I think that they're aware that they are super rich. So that's 15. Right now, the fundraising has gone way better than I anticipated, and it's really exciting, and I'm so grateful. And it's just amazing to see thousands of people respond to this narratively complex systems building stuff with the level of faith that they have, and it's awesome. So we have over $25,000 in monthly contributions from the small dollar donors, and that's amazing. That's about as much money as Crash Course brings in from patrons. And that's after only, what has it been, 2 weeks, a week and a half? And without having followed the story. So my hope is that as we follow the story, as you see more of like, well, this is the difference between Well Body Clinic and the difference between a clinic that gets no support from PIH, but will get support under this program. As you see more of that, I think more people will understand what we're trying to do, and then we'll give more, or we'll become monthly donors for the first time. But that $25,000 a month is huge, right? Because I'm not very good at math, so I'm going to have to bring this out. But it's $300,000 a year. I'm good enough at math to do this. So that's $1.5 million over 5 years if we stay at $25,000 a month. To really get this done, I think we need to get to like $30,000 or $40,000 a month. But that's still amazing because it's only been 2 weeks. And then in addition to that, there's been like $65,000 in one-time gifts. Lots of people can only do one-time gifts for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because they are only able to make a one-time gift, or maybe it's because they have to give through PayPal, which doesn't allow for recurring donations. Some international people were only able to give through PayPal, that kind of thing. So we think, certainly not all of those one-time gifts will recur, but some of them will. And so we think that is around, even at current rates, around, and somebody will probably check my math and tell me that I'm wrong, but we think that that's going to be around, even if that doesn't grow that much, which we hope it will and think it will, that's around another 2 million. In terms of matching right now, I think we've raised just over 250,000, which is again amazing, way beyond my initial expectations. If most of that money becomes annual, or if like the people who drop out, there are other people who come in, and that stays about the same, that we think that can eventually get to 300 or so, and that's another 1.5 over the course of 5 years. So then we are like about $6 million short. So where does that $6 million come from? There's the easy way and the hard way. The easy way is that somebody emails us and says, we'd like to give you Partners in Health Sierra Leone $6 million. I've been talking to a lot of people, and so far, I've set up a lot of conversations with people in like the hedge fundy worlds, or people in the big worlds of that, moving the pile of money around and making it get bigger. I don't have a great understanding of how this all works. And so far that has not worked, but it only has to work once. I am reminded of once a panhandler asking me if he could have $137. And I said, no. And he said, well, it only has to work once. So that's the situation. And then there's the hard way, which is over the course of the next year, working really hard to raise that money, which is basically what we're doing now. And that's what we're under the assumption that we're going to keep doing. And we think we can do it by doing it that way. I think we can do it. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that we can do it. I think that more people will come into this story as we follow it more closely, and as they start to see change happen, they'll want to be part of the story. Like, the reason I am so grateful to all of you is that on day one, you made this bet with us, which we really appreciate, because you're making it on the strength of Partners in Health's history, on the strength of what they've already accomplished in Sierra Leone, and that means a lot to us. All right, so I'm going to answer your questions. Sorry to not have answered your questions throughout, but I wanted to get through all of that. I think that's a basic overview of where we are. As far as like on the PIH Sierra Leone side, they are very excited. Several people texted me on the day of the announcement. Everybody at Partners in Health watched it together, and several people texted me to say this is the most important day in the history of Partners in Health Sierra Leone. As I said, the president of Sierra Leone tweeted about this, so it's obviously on the radar of the government, and the support of the Ministry of Health is absolutely essential in this succeeding. And we know that, and they know that, and it's great that everybody there is on the same page. I think PIH is really committed to making this happen. They've brought in a bunch of money, and they're going to bring in more. That's the other reason I'm confident that we can raise this $6 million, is because PIH is going to raise a bunch of it. And yeah, so I think that's where we are. And actually, and the other thing is that they've started to do these great audio updates that are for PIH employees in Sierra Leone, but I'm going to try to get those audio updates. I'm trying to convince them to share those audio updates with us, because they're great, and it's a great introduction. It's a great way to meet nurses and community health workers and doctors, and drivers and everybody else who's involved in these initiatives, the people who are actually doing the building. It's really great, and I think these audio updates, they're not calling it a podcast, but it's podcast-ish, are really inclusive in all of the best PIH ways, and look to hear from all of the people who are participating in this effort to strengthen the whole system. What's the first step other than fundraising? So that's from Meg. Meg, I might have answered some of that already, but the very first step is to hire more community health workers, because there's an immediate need and there's a structure in place to support those community health workers. And so there not that much else has to be like built system wide to make for those people to start having a big impact. And it is a really big impact. I mean, I've talked about this before, but when I spent that day with Ruth, I saw, we like to think in the rich world that the knowledge exchange in terms of healthcare systems only goes one way. But I think we have a lot to learn from people like Ruth and the way that they go about treating patients. Like, to use one example, Ruth met with a woman who, and so the first question Ruth asks is, were you able to take your medication today? And because Ruth has HIV and she's on antiretroviral therapy, she has a level of being able to empathize with people that, makes it a lot easier for people to talk to her. And the woman said, "No, I didn't take my medication today." And Ruth said, "Do you have it?" And the woman said, "Yes." And Ruth said, what are the barriers between you and taking your medication today?" And the woman said, "I haven't eaten, and when I take the medication, I just throw up if I haven't eaten and I don't have any food." And the medium-term solution to that is to get her family some kind of nutritional support program, right? Like that's key to all kinds of healthcare outcomes in these impoverished communities. But you have to do it in a way that doesn't like the way that the famous example of failed aid, of disastrous aid, is the U.S. dumping rice into impoverished communities, which of course then craters the price of rice, which impoverishes farmers and ends up, having all kinds of bad downriver effects. PIH, like most good aid organizations, I think a lot has been learned since then, and the way PIH does direct nutritional support, I think, is evidence-based and has a lot of data behind it. But that's a medium-term solution, right? You got to like go through this paperwork, you got to do this, you got to do that. So I told the story in the video, but one thing Ruth did was give that woman $2 of her own money, which represented 15% of her, I don't know, of her monthly, 12% of her monthly pay, something high, weekly. I don't know. I don't know. I'm so bad at math, guys. I'm not going to try to do that. But it was a higher percentage of her wealth than certainly Hank or I are giving to this. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that the other thing Ruth was able to say, because she has a lot of experience in this community and working with this population, and she lives here and she's had HIV for many years and she's been on antiretroviral therapy and she's been really poor, and she knows tricks and tips and ways to make it work. And so she said, you should drink some sugar water. And if you drink sugar water, you won't throw up. And that's not something that an American doctor probably would have known to say. Even a really experienced, well-trained, really good American doctor probably wouldn't have known to say that. And we need more people like Ruth who, there are lots of people who have the education background that they need to be community health workers. They need the training. And I think that amping up the number of people who are getting trained as CHWs starts immediately. And then the other stuff starts more slowly. Okay. Can you discuss the focus on the history of us and them in your video? This is different from what we usually see in philanthropy, i.e. ties to slavery and resource extraction. Yeah, I think it's important to understand the history of how this community ended up where it ended up. I don't think it's particularly. I just don't think it makes sense to pretend that our wealth is somehow entirely decoupled from Sierra Leone's impoverishment, because it isn't. I mean, that's a historical fact, because of the resources that were extracted from Sierra Leone to industrialize. And are still extracted from Sierra Leone to industrialize in the form of, the diamonds that go on to the tips of jackhammers and all kinds of other industrial equipment that allows us to build structures faster. But I also think the history of slavery is an extremely important part of the history of Sierra Leone, and an important part of the history of the United States. And I think the reason that the central reason why the U.S. became a rich country is because of a globalized economy with sophisticated systems of trade, which were not entirely built around slavery, but were in many did in many cases involve slavery. So I just don't think you can separate them out. But the other thing is that in thinking about us and them, I understand the urge to be like, well, we need to think about our neighbors and the people who live near us. And certainly, in Sarah and I's personal giving, our IRL community is extremely important to us, and we recognize the importance of, standing with the vulnerable people in our community, and there's poverty everywhere, and there's certainly lots of poverty in Indianapolis. But when we say like, oh, like we don't really need to deal with their problems, those problems are far away. Those problems are fundamentally not our problems, right? Like problems, the best example of this to me is cholera and tuberculosis, which in the 19th century in rich countries like Europe and the US were two of the deadliest, most terrifying diseases in the world. And if Americans were still dying of cholera, and those cholera outbreaks were starting in countries like Haiti and in Sierra Leone, there would be massive public health spending in Haiti and Sierra Leone to try to get better sanitation systems, not so that Sierra Leoneans would stop dying of cholera, but so that Americans would, right? You saw that with the Ebola outbreak. The moment the Ebola outbreak stopped being only in West Africa in 2014, and it started to be a few Americans, a couple of French people, that then suddenly there was a huge surge of attention and funding into addressing the Ebola epidemic. And thank God, that was a wonderful thing. I don't mean to like talk smack about emergency response at all. The problem is then that emergency is quote unquote over and people leave, and the healthcare system is weaker than it was before because 15% of Sierra Leone's healthcare workers have died of Ebola. And there is no new support. And so the circumstances that led to the Ebola outbreak are not just like the same, they're worse. So it's more likely that there will be another emergency. And you get yourself into that cycle of emergency response that doesn't follow up with systems building. And all you do is you create a world in which the next emergency becomes inevitable. My point is that when we think of because we don't think of diseases like tuberculosis and cholera as being our diseases, we start to make a them out of the people in the world who are the most vulnerable and who are the most structurally silenced by power, the people who we hear the least from in our cultural public discourse that happens on these social media platforms, that where we very rarely hear Sierra Leonean voices or even really any West African voices other than professional footballers. And we end up in the most profound and deep and tragic way turning the most vulnerable people into this them. And I mean, I said this in a video, but I really believe it. I don't want to be part of an us where the them is the people who are the most distant, the people whose problems are the most serious, and the people who are oppressed, and in many ways, like both figurative and literal, who suffer violence because of the power structures in our world. I don't want to be part of that us. So that's part of what this project's about for me. Because I don't think we have to. I know that we don't have to live in a world where 6% of Sierra Leonean women die in childbirth. I know that because we've seen all around the world that when healthcare systems get stronger, moms and kids start surviving. Sorry if that was rambly. You talked about cesarean sections and the lack of ambulances to get women to hospitals. How can we get Kono an ambulance? So we have to get several ambulances. But this is another place where vertical solutions like just an ambulance won't work. So actually, ambulances are a classic example of this. There's a lot of ambulances donated to poor countries, and then what happens is that the ambulance breaks down, and there are no parts. There are no ambulance parts. You need a specific kind of spark plug, and they can't find it. It's just not in the country. There's no mail delivery. There's no package delivery, so you can't really like order it from Amazon. And so what successful organizations do, I think, and what PIH does, is have a group of ambulances that is staffed and supported, and where they, because they've been doing this for 30 years, and they've done this in Haiti, and they've done it in Rwanda, and elsewhere, they know what kind of ambulances to get, and they know how to like keep them maintained over the long run. And you can't have a totally normal ambulance because the roads are so bad, so you need somewhat different like tires and suspensions and stuff, and they know how to do all of that. But that can only happen in partnership with everything else happening. So like it won't work just to like send an ambulance. Not least because people with good reason don't trust the system. Like they don't like if you're expecting to deliver soon in most of Kono, you don't want to go to the clinic even if they have an ambulance, because like you're not sure that going to the clinic decreases your chance of dying. You probably know several people who went to the clinic and died. And so we've got to make the whole thing better so that people can trust every facet of the system, if that makes sense. That's what I think anyway. All right, let me answer the rest of your questions. Seconding Fred's question, but I don't see Fred's question. Where was Fred's question? I'm seconding Fred's. Oh, can you discuss the focus? Oh, I did that. I hope I did that anyway. The extra credits video on the Bronze Age collapse, which Kate Green is a Geek talks about, is a great video. And it's a really interesting video about how the thing about systems is that they both create virtuous cycles and vicious cycles, right? And when they start to collapse, more of them collapse. The Bronze Age video is a great example. Another great example is what happened in Yemen over the last 10 years, which is that as a result of the civil war, everything got worse. Sanitation systems got worse. Garbage pickup systems got worse. Clinics got worse because it was harder to get supplies to them, and then health got worse, and then communicable diseases like cholera started to spread much faster because there were no systems in place to stop them from spreading, and because the sanitation system had been destroyed, and so water supplies were contaminated with cholera. Yeah. So, oh geez, PIH is here? Oof. Poof. No, I wasn't ready for that. I hope I'm doing okay, and if I'm not, you can tell me later. How can I lobby for U.S. federal funding for global maternal and child health efforts like this? That's a great question, and it's really important. The most important funders for this are governments. Our government, governments in poor countries, governments in rich countries, and it's really important. Public money is really, really important to making healthcare better, and some of the greatest achievements in public health over the last 30 years have at least involved public money. And we should celebrate those, and we should be happy about them, and we should also not elect governments that do not see health and anti-poverty aid. Yeah, I think right now, for instance, in the US, we have a government that does not see health aid and anti-poverty aid as the priority that it ought to be. And I also think that we have a government that has tied a lot of health aid to questions about family planning that just should not be the central questions that are being asked. Yeah, I don't think that whether or not, yeah, I don't think that access to birth control is a good reason to deny a community aid. Anyway, yeah, you have to pay attention to that stuff. You have to ask your senators, ask your congresspeople, ask your presidential candidates, where are you on this? What do you believe about this? Get them on the record, and then force them to keep their promises by annoying them, by calling them. I call my congressional representative Susan Brooks. I call her so much that she's retiring. I did it. I made her retire. I call her about resettling refugees in Indiana, which is the best thing about Indiana. And I call her about global health aid changing, which is not something she's very interested in. Do you have any book or article suggestions on this topic? Yes, I have three. They're all PIH related. The first is the New Yorker article. I think it's called Ophelia Dahl's National Health Service. It's not the best headline, but it's such a good article. It's written by Ariel Levy, and it's so good. She's a brilliant writer. I mean, in general, side note, her book, she wrote a memoir about losing a child late in pregnancy, that is brilliant and beautiful and wrenching, and has stayed with me in a big way. But her article about Ophelia Dahl and PIH is really great too, and a lot of it, they went to Sierra Leone, so a lot of it takes place in Sierra Leone, and it's great. You should read it. Also, if you don't mind like a little bit of academic stuff, there's this book by Dr. Joya Mukherjee, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Partners in Health, and I think it's called An Introduction to Global Health Delivery, which does not seem like the title of a rip-roaring read, but it kind of is a rip-roaring read because there's so many times in it when you're just like, what? Are you serious? Like, there are so many shocking facts in it. Like, for a long time, that the World Bank tied support from the World Bank to only spending, I think, 5 or 6% of GDP on healthcare, which of course was a disaster. Lots of stuff like that, but also lots of stuff about what's working in systems building, what's working in global health, what's working in poor communities and what's not, and why it doesn't. Really interesting, changed my life. And then the third one is Mountains Beyond Mountains, which I know a lot of you have read, but it's kind of a history of PIH through the lens of Paul Farmer by Tracy Kidder, and it's just a great book. And another book that definitely affected the way that I look at life. Those are the three that I recommend. Yeah, but they're really, they've been very helpful. How will a new center impact donor government funders and private funders? U.S. maternal mortality has been less than 100 per 100,000 since 1950. We've had the means. Yeah, so that's exactly it. We've had really strong systems. I mean, look, the U.S. healthcare system has a lot of problems, and I don't wish to portray it as the perfect model, certainly. But and in fact, like, we have much higher maternal mortality than in many countries, and we also have a big range of maternal mortality, and also our maternal mortality rate in our poorer communities is going up, which is should be a big concern, and that should give a lot of people pause about what's happening with our systems and how well our systems especially address the needs of poor people in the United States. That said, as you point out, the maternal mortality rate in the U.S. is, it's extremely low compared to Sierra Leone. I think it might be 99% lower, but I'm not positive. It's either 90% or 99%. Again, I'm really bad at math. The reasons for that are because of are systemic. We have great roads. We have great ambulances. People trust the healthcare system here because, by and large, it works for them in the sense that they know that they will get care, and they know that they will have every opportunity to have a healthy delivery and to have a healthy kid. And so the system is working for them. In Sierra Leone, the systems are not working for pregnant moms very well at all. I think that started to change, but it's hard to express how far away it is from being safe. You know, I mean, Partners in Health has been at Koidu Government Hospital for 5 years. They've done an amazing job. Like the transformation there is really remarkable. And as several people said to me when we were in the hospital, they said, you know, the biggest transformation isn't that we now have water or that we now have electricity or that we now have clean, safe surgical operating rooms. The biggest change is that we now have patients, because the hospital was in such a state of collapse that it really wasn't utilized. And now it is, and that's a huge step, but it's still wildly inefficient. And, you know, for the rest of my life, I'll be thinking about the room where sick kids were, you know, where newborn babies with complications were getting treated, and how inadequate that was. And one of the things that the MCOE will have, the Maternal Center of Excellence will have, is a NICU, and you know that's going to be a wonderful gift to the people of Kono, but also, you know, to the mothers of Kono, because I saw a lot of I saw moms holding their kids' hands while their kids were dying, and I knew, and they knew, and everyone knew that those kids didn't have to die. It's just it's not fair that happens because of a birth lottery. So yeah. Um, no, there's a great question from Nerdfighter 1994 that I don't know how to answer, which is, you noted that many millions of dollars have been extracted from Kono, yeah, or Koidu town, yeah. Do we benefit from resource extraction out of Sierra Leone? Yes, we do. What should be done about it? Is there ethical consumption under capitalism? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's hard. And I also don't want to speak for people. I don't want to speak for other people. You know, I don't want to speak for people in Kono. So I did. I guess I feel like I can tell you one story, but it's just one person's perspective. I don't want it to be seen as like an overall perspective. But we did talk with one person, and I was explaining that I'm from Indiana, and in Indiana we grow a lot of corn, and we're very proud of our corn, and we always tell people to buy Indiana sweet corn. And if you're not buying Indiana sweet corn, you're missing out on a hell of an opportunity. And we're all big civic boosters for our corn. And I asked him if he felt that way about diamonds. You know, if he felt that way about the diamond trade, that like always like getting people excited to buy diamonds and buy more diamonds, and you know, the same way I felt about corn. And he said no. And that was the end of that. So I don't know if that's reflective of everyone's opinion, but that's one person's opinion. Bryce has put in all of the links to the resources, I think. All right, I've got to go in a minute, but I want to answer a few more things. Julie says, I'm contemplating the great projects we've done with Nerdfighteria, wondering how to best engage Nerdfighteria to feel like this is something we're doing together as a community, including the people who can't give money. You've talked about how important attention is, so how could Nerdfighteria maximize that attention through like social shareable communications? And I think that's a very, very good point. So some of this is, we are up against structures on the internet that just don't care. To be frank, like this is just not what the like larger structures of the internet are going to be most interested in, right? Like I think we all kind of know that there's a thing that like Donald Trump can do that this project can't do, and that's okay, and we need to like be okay with that. But we do have lots and lots of people from within Nerdfighteria who care about complexity and who care about like complicated stories of trying to do good work in ways that have systemic benefit. We have lots of those people. And Julie, as you point out, a lot of those people are donating every month. Some of those people are donating when they can, and most of those people will never be able to donate because they're just not in a position to. They're just not able to, and that's okay. Having their attention is still really important because the whole reason Sierra Leone is in this mess is because of a lack of interest in the crisis. If the crisis had been responded to the way that the way that other crises can get that kind of attention, then we wouldn't be here in the first place. So I do think we need to do a good job of that. And so for me, I want to hear your ideas. You can email me at sparksflyup@gmail.com. We want to use as many of your ideas as you can. I think that encouraging people to share people's stories out of Kona once we're doing a better job of getting those stories on a regular basis is going to be an important part of that. I think asking people to continue to be part of this with us by paying attention to it. I think a Discord channel can be really good. But I think the reason I want to, in the future, I want to be doing regular updates like this, but that also include whether it's, Dr. Barry or John Lasher or, a maternity nurse at KGH, that include conversations with those people so that people in Nerdfighteria can hear directly from them and feel connected to that work and know that, and to try to bridge a little bit of the distance, right? Like I was saying earlier, that there's just an inherent distance when you're talking about cholera and tuberculosis because those are diseases that are very uncommon now in wealthy countries. But tuberculosis is the leading cause of death in the world among all communicable diseases. It is not, astonishingly, this disease that in the rich world we think of as having affected Brontes and other 19th century poets, it's the deadliest communicable disease in the world today. And we only think of it being in the past because it is in the past of what we are wrongly constructing as us. And so I think getting that message across to as many people as possible and in an ongoing long-term way so that like people who identify as nerd fighters also think to themselves, boy, I sure have watched a lot of videos about Sierra Leone and healthcare systems and systems building and tuberculosis, and I know a lot more about that stuff than I did 2 years ago, and then I know a lot more about that stuff than I did 4 years ago. I think that's going to be really key, is getting buy-in from lots of people, because the other thing is that a lot of those people aren't in a position to donate now, but they might be in 2 years or in 4 years or in 10 years or in 20 years. And what we really want to do, we really want to have a lasting impact, because this is not a 5-year problem. This is a long-term problem. This is a many decades old problem. The solution to it is not a 5-year solution. We're making a 5-year plan because that's how you make plans. But this is Hank and Sarah and Catherine and I always talk about an open-ended commitment to improving healthcare access for the poorest people in Sierra Leone. And to me, open-ended means open-ended. It means as long as we can and as long as it's needed. And so, we are hoping to help encourage especially the young people, but really everybody who watches our videos, to try to think more about systems and to try to close those empathy gaps that are created by these frankly corrupt power structures that tell us that the problems of people who live far away from us are not problems that are important or valuable or worth our attention. And so I think there's a variety of ways in which we do that, but I think we have to stay super focused on that, Julie, and it's a great point at the end of a discussion about fundraising that what's really going to lead to generational change in Kono and in the way that people think about philanthropy is making long-term changes in the way people think about this stuff. And that's a journey that I've been on over the last 10 years, and I know that some of you have been on it with me, and that I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. I have so much to learn. There's so much I don't know, and I'm really excited to be on that journey with you and to open it up to all the other donors and everybody else, anybody who cares to pay attention to this and who shares our belief that it's really important. Thank you again for donating so generously to this project. It has been, really overwhelming. I've had a very tearful week thinking about just how many of you have felt as strongly about this as we do, and have joined us, like I said, on mile 1 of this marathon. Having that support from day one just makes a huge difference, and we're really grateful and really excited. So I'll be doing this regularly. I also want to do some of these similar live streams with all the donors together, and then also anybody who's, maybe not just all the donors together, but anybody who's interested together. But those, will maybe have to be a little more circumspect about the details of fundraising and all that kind of crap. PIH, I'm sorry if I said anything wrong in the meeting. You can tell me later. I won't take it personally. And everybody else, thank you for being here. And thanks for being here with us, and thanks for joining us in this. It really is like just an incredible privilege and a joy, and I'm so glad we've gotten to this moment. And I'm a little tired, but we're just getting started. So I'm going to catch my breath, and we'll keep going. So feel free to email me again if you have any questions or concerns or ideas. I'm so grateful, especially to everybody who worked so hard to get us to this moment at PIH, and Nikki, especially, who I think is here on our team, but also Rosiana on our team, and Hank, and Catherine and Sarah, and so it feels really good to be here. But I also know, like I said, that this is an emergency, and addressing emergencies can't wait. This is urgent, and we're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep responding to it urgently, because that is the only response that is appropriate. So, thanks very much. Y'all are awesome. DFTBA. I don't know how to quit. I wish I knew how to quit you. Oh, I think I know. Every live stream ends this way, with me not knowing what to click. But I think I know. Thank you again. Goodbye.